If you're an orthodontist and you're on Facebook, you probably already heard of Dr. Glenn Krieger. But did you know why he started the Orthopreneurs Facebook group, which, by the way, has over 6,000 orthos from 91 countries? Or what advice he would give to startups? Or are you just curious what he would be doing if he wasn't an orthodontist? Well, inquiring minds want to know. Stay tuned.
The future of orthodontics is evolving and changing every day. But although the way to achieve practice growth has changed, there's never been a better time to be an orthodontist. Let's get into the minds of industry leaders, forward-thinking orthodontists, and technology insiders to learn how they see the future of the orthodontic specialty. Join your hosts Dr. Leon Klempner and Amy Epstein each month as they bring you insights, tips, and guest interviews focused on helping you capitalize on the opportunities for practice growth. And now, welcome to the golden age of orthodontics with the co-founders of People and Practice, Dr. Leon Klempner and Amy Epstein.
Welcome to the golden age of orthodontics. I'm Dr. Leon Klempner, trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. I'm currently a dad. I'm about to celebrate my 49th wedding anniversary. Board certified orthodontist, director of orthodontics at Mount Sinai Hospital here in New York, part-time faculty at Harvard. I'm the CEO of People in Practice. I'm also a wannabe blues musician, and I'm joined by my partner, my daughter, my co-host, Amy Epstein. Okay, Amy, who are you?
It's a good question. I'm still figuring out what I want to be when I grow up every day. Give it some thought, make some adjustments. Do you remember when you gave me that book, What Color is Your Parachute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Remember that?
Didn't do you any good, did it?
Not at all. Anyway, okay, so I'm Amy Epstein. Who am I? I'm a business owner. I'm a mother of two. I'm a slightly above average cello player, if I do say so myself. I recently joined the board of my daughter's daycare because I want to get back to the community that I live in up here in Westchester. I have an MBA in marketing and 20 years of public relations and marketing experience. Now, going back to the intro, while I had heard about Dr. Glenn Krieger, I only really met him recently when I had the good fortune to sit next to him during dinner at the Dental Monitoring Summit, which was just this spring. And he is a force. Glenn is our guest on the show today. And just to give you a little background about his experience, he's a fellow of the Academy of General Dentistry and is a practicing orthodontist in Louisville, Texas. Beside orthodontists, his passion is building community. And I really like that about his approach. I also feel like I'm a community builder in my own way. He feels that in today's competitive world, that the orthodontic and dental communities should be collaborative and should be sharing information so that we can help one another succeed. And that philosophy was really the genesis of the Orthopreneurs Facebook group, which he founded to help practice owners come together to crowdsource solutions. Now, there is now a meeting and there's all sorts of other resources that he can let us know about, but the Facebook group, I think, was really the genesis. He spends significant time in continuing education as well, working with consultants and business trainings and giving presentations, publishing articles. We are thrilled to welcome to the podcast today, Dr. Glenn Krieger. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm flattered. You guys have perfect voices for radio. I'm just saying, I feel like I'm on an NPR show of some sort.
Hey, you're not so bad yourself over there with your perfect clarity and podcast voice. So we know you have a podcast too.
I've been told I have a face for radio, so I'm glad to hear my voice goes with it. Well, welcome, Glenn. Glenn is a fellow New Yorker at heart, I believe, living in Texas now.
Yes,
but I feel like Glenn was gracious enough to have me as a guest on his podcast, the Orthopreneurs podcast with Dr. Glenn Krieger. So if you haven't listened to that, we'll put something in the show notes. You definitely want to subscribe to that and check it out.
Thank you.
So this time we thought it would be interesting to have him on the other side of the mic, so to speak. So let's start off, basic question, Orthopreneurs. Last time I looked, over 6,000 members. How did it come about?
Yeah, we're probably about 6,500 members now from about 99 countries. I'm waiting for that 100th. I don't know which one it's going to be, but there's a lot of countries in there. My story is pretty simple. I was the youngest dental student in the country when I went to dental school. And then when I went back to ortho, I was the oldest ortho resident in the country when I went back at age 44. And so I had 20 years of significant CE, a lot of focus on business. I did a year at the University of Washington Business School at a special program they had for dentists at the time. And, the old saying, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So when I went to residency, here I was with 28, 29-year-old folks who didn't have a lot of business experience. So I was sort of the de facto, hey, Glenn, I got a contract. What do I do with it guy? How do I find an attorney? How do I find an accountant? And again, I'm not the most knowledgeable person on the planet, but certainly in that sphere, if you will, I knew more than most. And so I started guiding people and giving them advice and helping them along and reminding them that ortho residency is the easiest time of their life, because when they get out, it's going to get a lot more challenging. And when I came out of school in 2014, there were some resources online. There were some paid groups you could be a member of. And there was one group, Ortho 101, you may remember it, that doctors, team members could be members of. It was a little toxic. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming, a lot of stuff that didn't really resonate with me. And then one day, through a whole series of what are now kind of famous events that occurred in one day, the whole site was shut down. And I fortuitously, I'd been walking out with my wife. We were walking our dogs that afternoon. And I said to her, I don't like the toxicity of the group. I'm thinking about starting my own. What do you think? And she said, well, if you feel you have to, go get it. And then I came back and my phone exploded with all the messages. And I just said, hey, everybody, I'm starting a new group called Orthopreneurs. And the focus is going to be on how to live a more profitable, low stress life. It's going to be focused on business. It's going to be focused on management. It's going to be focused on leadership. The focus is not clinical. If you want to post clinical, go for it. But, my firm belief is that every orthodontist who might be listening to this is more than a good enough trained orthodontist to do good results. But the overwhelming majority are not trained well enough to get great leadership or management or business results. And the unfortunate truth in our industry is that people flock like moths to a flame if I start talking about anything clinical. We start talking about how to develop a policy and system, or how to manage HR more effectively, or how to be a better leader through, personal work. And all of a sudden everybody puts their hands up and goes, ooh, I'm not really drawn to that, which is precisely the reason why we need to keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, it's a wildly successful group. I think that everyone who takes part in it really gets a lot out of it. And we know that there's the opportunity to put out questions and, get perspectives on all different topics. And one of them I know that comes up not only on Orthopreneurs, but in some of the other groups as well, is it's not a controversial topic, but, a pretty relevant topic right now in the ortho world where people have strong opinions on both sides, is the decision to partner with an OSO. And I know from talking to my dad that you partnered with Smile Doctors and are happy with your decision. Can you tell us a little bit about what orthodontists who are considering that type of decision should do, research, prepare for when considering joining an OSO?
Sure. Yeah. And, it's kind of funny because it's really controversial for those who really don't understand it, right? For those who really understand it, it's not controversial. It's easy, right? It's a yes or a no. But like many things in orthodontics and dentistry and life, there's often a vocal minority that doesn't really understand it, but knows that it has to be bad. And so first thing I would say is that most orthodontists aren't in a position to have people in their life who are going to be able to guide them on these things really well from a neutral perspective. I happen to have a cousin who runs a private equity firm and started one himself. And so I've got great resources to where I can talk to somebody. But we did a deep dive for probably 6 months of real research on the pros, the cons, the model, because the model is the key to everything. When you understand what the model of an OSO is, then you really start to understand how these things really function. And so we interviewed a bunch, spoke to a number of DSOs and OSOs, ultimately felt it was the right decision for us to go that route. If people are looking for resources, if they go to orthopreneurs.com and look at my blog, there's an article in there that was written in May of 21. I just reposted on it in Orthopreneurs yesterday, as a matter of fact, that talks a great deal about, it's probably about 5 to 6 pages long, that gives people a very broad overview of what is an OSO, how does an OSO work, what does it mean to an orthodontist, where does the money come from, everything that you really need to understand as a basic primer. And then, of course, I updated that yesterday in Orthopreneurs with a lot more information about where things are today. But to go back to your original question, the key understanding of an OSO is that, number one, they want to acquire good practices. They don't want to acquire you when you're 6 months out of residency. And if your practice is going down in value, this is not an exit strategy for a doctor who's looking to retire. I want everybody to think about it as if they were looking to buy an ortho practice. Would you buy an ortho practice that's going down? Would you buy an ortho practice that's doing $200,000 a year or $500,000 a year? You're investing in the doctor that's running it and their ability to keep it running and to keep it profitable and keep it growing. And the whole premise is that if we can pool, take Smile Doctors for instance, if they can pool a number of like-minded, core value-based practitioners who build successful practices together and then institute some economies of scale, like buying power, HR, and manage things from an effective higher level and institute systems that are congruent and draw everybody together, that you can be more profitable just from that. So the whole goal of an OSO, it's private equity backed, and the whole goal of an OSO is to buy something, invest in it, invest time, resources, money, and then eventually sell that to another private equity company that gives it more money. And the equity they have in it, as the name would imply, private equity, is how they make their money. And for orthodontists, it means getting a very large paycheck up front, hopefully. It means practice autonomy if you join the right one, and Smile Doctors for sure allows me practice autonomy. And it allows you the opportunity, hopefully, to get some equity in the company, meaning that when they succeed by running a more profitable, better run organization than the one you joined, that the enterprise makes money, and because you have equity in the enterprise, you make money as well. And it's one of the more misunderstood parts of the whole process. And it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, although you're being paid for the work you've put in over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So it's not get rich quick, but it can make people wealthy. It can allow you to partner with 20, 50, 100, 300 other doctors. So you've got a common goal. And it's a topic I could sit here and talk about for hours on end, but I hope that gives you a little bit of a basic understanding of what an OSO is and some of the reasons why we chose to join one.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I could see it. It's not for everyone, but
Nope.
I teach a lot of residents, and as you know, going to ortho school now, the residents are coming out, particularly at Harvard, coming out with $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, and they need to pay off their debt. And the entry into the marketplace for a new graduate is much more limiting than it was years ago. The associateships leading to partnerships, those don't really exist anymore. So it's a great opportunity to make money. And recently I posted on the Orthopreneurs Facebook page that I wanted to do a podcast with somebody that's working in a DSO OSO model, and to give us the pros and give us the cons, because there's always pluses and minuses. And I got crickets.
Sure.
Now, I don't know if I got crickets because there are legal implications. They have to sign something that they can't discuss negatively. I don't know what it is, but crickets. So tell me, what are the pluses and minuses?
At first, I'll tell you the whole crickets thing. My 2 cents is, obviously, I think a young orthodontist is kind of scared to get out there and speak about it, a multi-billion-dollar organization. It doesn't have to be Smile Doctors, it could be anybody. There's only been one company that's ever had an equity turn in orthodontics in the US, and that's Smile Doctors. So when I say multi-billion, I'm applying to one, but they're big companies, and it could be intimidating, I think, for somebody to say, I'm going out there. I don't think it's legal. I think we've also seen an influx of these anonymous posts in groups. There's a new Chick-fil-A down the block. Who's tried it? And someone will post that kind of anonymously. So I think people are just kind of scared. There's a really funny post by Kyle Fagala on the Digital Orthodontist that I encourage everybody to go listen or read about, what's appropriate to post anonymously and what is not. But in answer your question initially, I do think people are nervous to get up on stage, if you will. But I'll do everything I can to try to help that along. But going back to your question, what are the pros? Well, I'm a strong advocate, and anybody out there who's listening should certainly reach out to me on Facebook if they want to, or reach out through the podcast, however you want, if they want to learn more. But I think today's, and you have to be careful, there's a big distinction between a DSO and an OSO, right? A DSO is predominantly dental or multi-specialty. An OSO is orthos, almost entirely orthodontics. You could have some pediatric here and there, but it's predominantly ortho run. If you're going to a well-run OSO, and I'm not talking about one that's got 5 or 10 practices, and that could be well-run. I'm talking about something that's got a significant number of doctors in it and has been around for a while. You know that if you go into work in it, chances are you're going to work alongside or under the direction of somebody who was acquired by that OSO, which means, as I said earlier, probably successful at building a practice, probably knows something about leadership, something about management, and you're going to get paid really well. The pay is pretty solid. You might have the opportunity to develop equity in the broader organization or to earn equity over time. And it's, any good OSO should lean on an associate to continue trying to build the practice. If you go to a DSO and, raise your hand if you've ever worked at a DSO, which I've done, it's often plug and play. You show up one day a month or one day a week at a specific dental office. The assistants are general dental assistants. They don't have an upper life 5 bracket. So you got to, I once had an assistant bond brackets with band lock, which for those of you who are not orthodontists, just makes you just want to grab your head and be like, what are you doing? Because it's blue. And so those situations are not very fun for orthos traditionally. Those are the ones we came out of school and went into. They work you like a dog. They don't pay you amazingly well. I worried really about my professional future, and was I putting my license on the line by working on these patients with these assistants in these conditions. In most OSOs, you're not going to have to worry about that because compliance and making sure things are done above board is really important to them. They're not fly-by-night organizations. So I think there's a major positive of possibly getting some great experience alongside a proven doc, learning management, learning systems, being in a good office, because I'm yet to see an OSO acquired office that was a dump. And you have the opportunity to, while trying to build a practice a little bit, right? They're expecting you to try to be productive, and it's in your best interest to do that. You're not going to get massive pressure on you, but some OSOs, like Smile Doctors, again, you're going to hear me keep saying Smile Doctors because, again, while I am affiliated and a partner there, I don't know the practices within other ones because I don't practice in them. So I can only speak to Smile Doctors. But they've got a program called Rising Stars where they'll take a young associate and mentor them and teach them management and leadership and try to make them the best they can be. And the hope is that these people will stay for long periods of time because it's a safe, hopefully enjoyable, hopefully lucrative and rewarding place to be. And if you can get around the idea that you don't have ownership, right? That's one of the negatives. If you're looking to be an owner, you don't have ownership per se. But what if you could earn $100,000, $150,000, $500,000 in equity in the broader private equity of the company, right? If you can earn $250,000 in equity, and I know associates who have earned $250,000 in equity by working for a number of years, when that private equity transaction occurs, which is hopefully, let's call it a 2 to 3x multiple being fair and historically accurate, that associate could potentially work at an OSO for 5, 7, 10 years, walk away with a lot of money in their pocket that they've earned, a lot of experience, and maybe have $500,000 to $1 million of equity that they've just earned, pay their long-term capital gains at 20% or so, and now have cash to go buy a practice if that's where they want to go, or to build a practice. So to me, it's a far better direction for anybody, even if they don't have huge loans, right? To make a great living, potentially get equity, get mentorship. And again, I'm speaking for Smile Doctors, but I'm sure there's other ones out there that'll do this. And a downside, again, is, you're not the boss, right? But that's going to be the case no matter where you work. The biggie is the restrictive covenant, right? Because you work in one practice and you got a restrictive covenant, there's a lot of green space open for you. You work in an OSO that's got 75 offices in your state, or a DSO that's got 75 offices in your state, and you leave them, you might have a harder time finding a place to practice. But again, I would say, if you go in with the right mindset, if you want to work, you want to make a living, you want to become a better ortho, you want to become a better leader and manager, and you want to be around, and this is really key, being around some really smart and talented people at meetings and on phone calls. And OSO is a great place to be because, again, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but when I'm on a phone call for Smile Doctors and I'm around people like Ben Fishbein and Amanda Gallagher and Ed Wentz and Zach Casagrande and Josh Adcox and Scott Law, I could go on and on and on. They're all my partners. So if I'm a young orthodontist and I see that Josh Adcox, who's like a genius with dental monitoring, is on there, I can just text him and go, Josh, do you mind if I have a couple of questions for you about dental monitoring? He'll say, sure. I'll see the Zach Casagrande's on there, one of the top 2 or 3 Invisalign providers in the United States in terms of volume. Hey, Zach, do you mind if I ask you some questions about some preferences? Amanda, Ed, anybody, you can ask them these questions. So to me, that's a huge plus. And as long as you get good legal representation to make sure that you have your I's dotted and your T's crossed and all the pros and cons explained to you, I see it as a vital part of your decision-making process when you take your first job.
So Glenn, it's clear that you could speak about this topic for a while. And I know you've got another podcast, so I want to move on. But I do want to just insert the other argument, which is that there are a lot of financial advisors that would tell you that owning your own practice in the long run puts you in a better financial position than if you were to join and stay with an OSO. So just that's a topic for another podcast, and I'd love to have you back and
sure,
discuss that aspect of it as well.
Yep.
Love to.
Yep.
Would love to. And
but
I've run the numbers, by the way.
Go ahead.
What's that?
I run the numbers. I've run the numbers on spreadsheets using every variable I can. And the only problem you face is in that argument, we have to take into account the equity rollover, the transaction value from the enterprise level, and nobody knows what that number is. Because if you have 100,000 in equity and the company does 6X versus 2X over 2 or 3 turns, it plays a huge role. But like you said, whenever you want, we can dive into that one.
and there may be no equity, depending. Go.
I wanted to just mention that the point about community is important. And I think it probably speaks to the success of the Orthopreneurs overall, the group and the meeting and everything, is that doctors, all team members, everyone looks for community. You can work in your own practice, but when you have community, you're exposed to all the different scenarios that they've ever dealt with and the solutions that they've uncovered as the most effective, the technologies that they're using, and to what effect. You mentioned dental monitoring earlier. And so I think there is a lot of value in there. And, to plug our own second podcast, we have something that we're launching too that's designed in a way like Orthopreneurs is to connect the broader orthodontic team to others that are having experiences that they'd like to learn from, having problems that they'd like to find solutions to. So I think the point about community, Glenn, is really well taken.
I think the statistics would bear out the fact that the overwhelming majority of us are practicing it alone. Not 90%, but it's more than the majority, I would be willing to bet, are practicing by themselves. And I think one of the reasons why Orthopreneurs and other groups have been successful aren't necessarily a function of the individual running them. It's because I think as human beings, we crave that togetherness. Not everybody, but the joke we all make, and I'm sure you two could appreciate this, is that nobody gets us like us. I can sit around a barbecue with 30 of my friends who are all college graduates, professionals, and they don't understand what we do on a regular basis. They have no idea, because we are the CEOs of a company and work alongside the line worker, right? You wouldn't see Lee Iacocca back in the day working a line all day long with a guy who graduated high school and was making $15 an hour and expect that to be his social group at work all day long. And so they're great people. I love my team members. But again, we're the CEOs working the line. We're entrepreneurs. We're managers. We're marketers. We're always worried about making payroll if you care about your business. You're going to eat what you kill. You got to take home a living. And the overwhelming majority of our friends who are physicians, attorneys, private equity, businessmen, many of them don't really understand what it is that we do. And I think that goes to what exactly you mentioned about community, is because if you put 5 orthodontists in a room, we could all just throw our hands up and have a drink over the fact that, who here has a mom who called and says, I'm pissed off that I can't get in after school. Go tell it to your attorney friends and they'll sort of laugh you out of the room. But we all share the same problems. And unfortunately, there are lots of people who aren't blessed with a positive outlook, or are cursed with a little bit of a depression or anxiety, unfortunately, and it's a real affliction. And I think these communities are saving lives, to be honest. I think I don't know about you guys, I'd love to hear from you if you've gotten messages or emails from people that said, you know what, I was on the brink and then I heard that podcast, or I saw that post, or someone reached out to me. But for the groups that are out there and the people like yourselves doing what you're doing, I think there's people out there that would have slipped through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree.
Real purpose to the work that everybody does.
So I'm going to switch. One quick plug, if I may.
Yeah.
At People in Practice, one of the things we have is something called the Inner Circle, which is clients of ours where we meet periodically and discuss different topics openly. And I think, speaking to the community, that this has been one of the most, what I've gotten back is one of the most valuable add-ons to working with a marketing company is creating such a community. So yeah, we're totally on board with that.
Yep.
It's beautiful.
So, Glenn, traditionally on our podcast, we invite our listeners to submit questions that our guests can then answer. Would you mind if we played one for you now?
No, it's like that old TV show, right? Where the voice comes out of nowhere and says, "Oh my God, Jimmy was such a great student as a child." Yeah, I'd love it. I'm looking forward.
Okay.
Hey there, Doug Shaw here, practicing orthodontist in Rockwall, Texas, but I am currently coming to you from the Red Rocks of Southern Utah in St. George. My question to you is, Glenn, what advice would you give a new startup orthodontic practice, or anybody trying to develop a more effective practice for that matter?
Yeah, that's Doug. He's my partner. He's in Utah with his family right now, and his wife and kids. And I love that guy. He's one of my best friends in the whole world. And it brings such a smile to my face to see him. Love you, Doug. I really do, man. If I can I'll answer the question, but I just want to throw something out there. For anybody who's met Doug and I, the first question they always ask us is, can you explain your partnership? We don't get it. Because, I was 44 when I started residency. He was about 29. We went to residency together and just found a common moral base. And, we said to each other, like, one day we're going to practice together. And he had a job waiting for himself in Oklahoma. I had a job waiting in Florida, both great options. And then one day I just wanted out of Florida. I wanted to move to Texas. And I said, Doug, I'm moving to Texas. You want to come with me? And he's like, for reals? For reals. And that's all it took. And he said, sure. We had no plan. We just knew we were going to practice together. His wife was on board. My wife was on board. And I tell everybody this, 2 things. One, please go listen to the Orthopreneurs podcast, episode number 1. I think it's like 300 episodes. Number 1, I felt the most important was Doug and I talking about our partnership, because it's unique, it's different. And for anybody out there who wants to learn what makes a partnership work, it could, who knows, 2 years from now, it might go up in flames. I hope not, because he's my friend and I'd be broken up about that. But the key thing here to remember is don't ever, and I'd love, again, afterwards, if you want to take this one, I'd love to hear your feedback from both of you, but I would tell everybody, don't ever partner with somebody for any reason other than love. If you love that person, if you love them, I mean, I'm not saying, well, we get along. We've hung out at a couple of football games. If you love that person, if you couldn't imagine your life without that person, partner with them. But if you're not going to be best friends, if you're not going to invite each other over to the house all the time, if you're not going to put them down as the executor on your will, right, you should not be their partner. I don't care how good the business opportunity is. I don't care about how many practices they have. The road to ruin is littered with the corpses of partnerships that were built on money or opportunity. And I beg everybody, if you're thinking about a partnership and you don't know the person, get to know them, spend time with them, learn if they're going to be your best friend, because this, and I would argue, is almost as important, if not as important, as your spouse or significant other. The moment I met Doug, we just knew he was the one. I just knew it. He knew it about me. And when I met my wife, I knew she was the one. And again, if our partnership broke up tomorrow, I wouldn't lose a moment's sleep over the money. I would lose a lot of tears over the friendship. And again, I don't know what your feedback is, but you asked me about startups. I mean, I'm just saying, rule number one, going to partner with anybody on a startup, best friends. And so,
I mean, you're preaching to the choir over here. If you ask for our opinion on it, I mean, it's a father-daughter team over here. So I mean, agree with you 100%.
The minute I saw Amy, I said, all right, that's going to be my partner. You know?
But you know, there are
to be fair.
But in fairness, there are a lot of father-daughter relationships that I'm privy to in the ortho world where they're not best friends, where being partners is probably not a good idea, where the younger of the two feels under the thumb or doesn't feel like they can get out and do what they want to do, or there's a communication issue. And that's why I said, if ever your partnership is going south, work on the friendship. Don't work on building up the numbers. I mean, that's important. You know, your team needs to be addressed, but work on the love. I know it sounds silly. It sounds weird. We don't use the word love a lot in business, but you better love your partner. I mean, you better love being around them. And so, you know, rule number one for startup would be that. Rule number two is you don't know anything. You don't know anything. If you think you know what a startup is like and you've never done a startup, you have no idea. And there was a post in Orthopreneurs recently about somebody who had an opportunity to go do a startup, and it was in an OSO or a DSO. And my response to them was, you know, I wouldn't, and again, I don't mean this in any insulting way, and I think both of you will get it, as will many of your listeners. I would not want to take a long-term position of equity in any OSO that had proven doctors in it, but would rather take an associate and plug them in to start a new practice. To me, that was, you know, I would rather take somebody who's done it before, who has a track record, who knows what they're doing, to run that, because if they're choosing the other route, that worries me a little bit about the leadership and the management, and the way they want to run things there, if that's a routine way of doing things. But I think you have to understand you don't know anything, and when you think you know something, you don't, and you're going to learn how little you know, and that's when you're really starting to learn. And so hire as many consultants as you can for specific purposes. You want marketing, you hire a marketing consultant. You want to get a control of your numbers, either hire a consultant who will teach you, or go to a course where you'll learn how to read a P&L and a balance sheet and understand the difference between cash and accrual, right? And understand, what does it mean when a line item says what it's saying? And you're running a business. So don't forget you're running a business, and you need to understand the numbers. You need to develop projections, right? Things don't happen by accident, and that which is given attention happens. So develop a business plan, develop policies and systems, follow things by the book, consider getting engaged in something like EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System developed by Gino Wickman. Read the book Traction. It'll give you a very good summary of it. And you can always invest in getting one of their implementers for about $7,500 a day that will end up making you 100 times that over the course of your career. And so I think the most important thing, if someone's listening and says, I'm thinking of doing a startup, number one, top of the list, is follow the basic EOS premise of developing your 5-year or 10-year plan. When you close your eyes without any compromise whatsoever, what does your life, not your practice alone, what does your life look like in 5 or 10 years? You pick the distance out you want, maybe 7, go biblical. But 7 years from now, what does your life look like? I know it sounds silly, but how many kids do you have? Are you married or are you unmarried? Are you traveling a lot? Where do you live? What kind of house do you live in? What does your commute look like? What kind of patients do you want to work on? You want to work on the wealthy with higher income, higher cost, however, a lot more maintenance? Do you want to work on a lower income or a middle income where you might have different kinds of individuals that are easier to work on? Trust me. Raise your hand if you've worked on both. What kind of patients do you want to see? How many do you want to see a day? What does your practice look like? How much team do you have? Write that down for 5 or 7 years, as crystal clear as you can be. For me to be there in 5 years, what benchmarks, and by the way, there should be objective numbers in there, not just subjective. For me to hit those numbers in 5 years, at 3 years, what numbers do I need to have to say that if I'm going from New York to California, when I hit Chicago, how do I know that I'm on the right path? Right? How do I know that I'm not ending up in Duluth or Fort Lauderdale? So 3 years, what are my numbers? And give me 5 to 10 things of what the practice and life look like in 3 years. Now go down to 1 year. Okay, I'm heading towards California. I know I want to hit Chicago. What does Western Pennsylvania look like to me? So a year from now, 1 year from right now, what are the objective measurable benchmarks in overhead, production, staff numbers, starts, new patient calls, leads, whatever you want that you can measure. Make a scorecard of 5 things that you need to measure. And now, last but not least, what are the things that are preventing you from right now to getting to that 1 year number? So we call those, or EOS calls those, your boulders, your rocks. Develop them, assign them for 90-day time periods of who's in charge of that rock, and tackle them. And in 90 days, you should be able to knock off 80% as your success rate. Knock them off, and now pick another bunch of rocks that are going to get you to your 1 year goal. And when you get to 1 year, are you on track or not? And if not, why not? And if you follow that pattern, it's predictable now. Now you're not just opening up a shingle, and to quote General Omar Bradley, who said, we must navigate by the light of the stars, not by that of every passing ship. And the light of the stars in this case is your objective quantifiable map. Are you on your map or are you not? And if you use that to guide you, all the other stuff I mentioned is important. But if you've got a roadmap to take you where you want to go, every decision about technology, about hiring, about marketing, all becomes crystal clear because either it matches or it doesn't. And core values are going to play a huge role in all of that. So again, we could talk about this for hours, but I hope that helped in some way.
It sure does. And, I'm about to ask you our final question. And I feel like I may even be able to figure out an answer to the question, which is,
go get it.
The beginning of the show, we talked about, what we wanted to be when we grew up, or how we were figuring out who we wanted to be. So, Glenn, if you weren't an orthodontist, what would you be?
It's such a hard question. I know you probably hear that from everybody, that it's a hard question.
It is a hard question.
Because I've changed, right? At 47, I became somebody totally different. And so like your dad, like Leon, I don't think I'm ever going to grow up. If I could do it all over again, realistically, I want to be a lead guitarist in a rock band. I don't play guitar well at all. I'm horrible. So I think that's my alter ego wanting to do that.
We have 3 mediocre musicians on this call, by the way, so we can start our own mediocre band.
You're an above average cello player. I am a far below average. I have some talents, and one of them is not music. I promise you. But if I could, you know, it's hard to say because it's going to come out for the wrong reasons. It's going to sound bad when I say this, and it's okay to mock me for it. But if I could do it all over again, a politician, but not for the reasons you would think, right? I'm about community. My social capital is connecting people. And I want to make change in this world. I can't see a problem and not fix it. That's been the driving factor of everything in my life has been, I see a problem and I want to fix it. And I want to bring people together. And money has never played the number one role in my life. I've walked away from my dad's practice. He had 4 practices. I chose to move to Seattle. You know, we were in Seattle. I had a killer practice, but my wife couldn't live there. We left it and went to ortho residency. I had a job waiting for me that was a cushy, amazing job in Florida, but we felt it would be better for the family to be in Texas. So money has never played a role. And if I could go to politics in the purest sense of politics, where you could change policy and help people and bring people together and change the world in the right way, which unfortunately is not what politics, in my opinion, has become about today, that would have been beautiful. Short of that, professional headhunter would have been great. Taking people who have a skill and putting them with, and connecting 2 companies together, a company with a person, watching them both succeed. To me, that would be a pretty amazing job to have.
I can see you in all those roles.
Thank you.
Successfully. Glenn, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking with you. If our listeners have questions for you or want to learn more about Orthopreneurs or your summit or anything, or the podcast, how is it easiest to reach you?
Easy. They can either reach me on Facebook, if they're on Facebook, which a lot of people are not. If they're on Facebook, they can hit me up just at, Glenn Krieger, DM me. I'm thrilled to talk to anybody. If somebody wants to send me just a simple email, I'm always happy to get emails at Glenn, which is GLENN, at KriegerMail.com. That's just KriegerMail.com. And I'll, email isn't the greatest way to get me, but if you're not on Facebook, get me that way. I'm always happy to answer any questions that anybody has, because again, like what you're doing, we're all in this together and we're only going to get better if we help each other.
Truth. Thanks, Glenn. We'll have you on again. Appreciate your time very much.
Likewise. Thank you.
This episode is powered by Dental Monitoring. You can learn more about them on our website or on theirs at dentalmonitoring.com. And you can subscribe or download other episodes of our podcast, The Golden Age of Orthodontics, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoyed it, we'd appreciate you telling a colleague. For more information about people in practice, we are marketing and growth consultants. Please check out our website at pplpractice.com. And the next time you check out your Golden Age of Orthodontics podcast feed, you'll see our inaugural episode of Practice Talk, which is a brand new podcast for people in practice media that amplifies the voices of ortho practice team members, like we were talking about earlier, with the overarching goal of unearthing the strategies that create thriving ortho practices by the people who do it every day, the team members. So this podcast came about because we were thinking about how we could build a community to support orthodontic team members. And they ask for our advice every day because as consultants, we talk with lots of practices, but each of those individual practices, there aren't a lot of ways to know what's going on in other practices. So that's the reason why we started up this podcast. And we know that people trust those who are in the same shoes as they are. And so we're going to use our platform and our powers to connect people like Glenn does with Orthopreneurs. So we look forward to introducing you to Practice Talk in just a few weeks. Thanks for listening to The Golden Age, and we hope you enjoy Practice Talk.
We appreciate everybody for watching and listening. Very grateful to Glenn for sharing all of his knowledge and background with the group. If you'd like to contact me, you can email me at leon@pplpractice.com. If you want to chat with me, I have a live chat going on our website that connects to my phone. So I'm actually answering those chats in real time. So If you got nothing to do, you want to say hi, you can reach me there. And most importantly, remember, for forward-thinking orthodontists, there has never been a better time to be an orthodontist. Take advantage of it. So bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to the Golden Age of Orthodontics. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or visit our website at thegoldenageoforthodontics.com for direct links to both the audio and video versions of this episode.